Dude, thank you for being here. First of all, taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for asking me. I was like, one of my dreams with this book was that with the 6 tentacles of it, that it would start to like sink into the sub communities that I've been talking about. So you reaching out, I was like, haha, I've hit the ravers. I want to do a keynote speech at Electric Daisy Carnival. You know, I want like Carl Cox to shut down and me to just get up behind a lectern and do like a 45-minute book reading and lecture just about my time in the rave world. I really feel like the 14-year-olds on Molly will respond well to that kind of analysis.
I mean, you know, there is some precedent for long speeches in the middle of house music songs.
Oh, that's very true. That's very true. And also David Guetta, it's Guetta? Guetta?
I always say Guetta, but I don't, probably the correct pronunciation is Guetta.
Of course, we're all obsessed with David Guetta, David G, solving the systemic societal problems with the same house track.
Yeah.
He's so close to getting everything solved. Next, I would like to tackle misinformation and the Second Amendment. And once again, it's Martin Luther King that I will be dropping.
Well, okay, so this is part of why I was also excited to talk to you, is I can tell, I mean, I'm a fan of your work in comedy and writing and all that, but I can tell, I read the DJ chapter in your book, and I've heard you talk about DJing over the years in different places. I can tell there's a real passion for it, like an actual, like a deeper love. You know, you're not like a celebrity hired to do a DJ set at a corporate event. You know what I mean?
No, in fact, I've not been hired to do a DJ set. No one has taken the book and ported that over to getting me work. In fact, somebody contacted me a little while ago about some EDM festival that they were doing a comedy tent at.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, that's great. That's great. I'd love to do that. You know, in fact, I've recently started DJing again after a 20-year hiatus. I'd love to do like a combo move. The trail went cold.
Well, okay, so this is, I feel like this would be, if this was a doctor's appointment, this is the part where we like take your vitals to the very intro.
Sure.
When was the last time you DJ'd? Like in public, in front of people?
Okay, now that is not, you should have asked me that 6 months ago.
Okay.
Or a year ago. Since I have begun, and I'm sure we'll discuss the story of how I started DJing again. But since I have begun again, I got like a pretty high profile gig at this party up in Mendocino at the wedding of David Kasher, my brother. So that was like a pretty, I mean, I think in the you know, it goes like, what is it? Tomorrowland? Is that the big one in Europe?
That's a big one, yeah.
Then it goes Rabbi David Kasher's wedding, and then it goes Electric Daisy Carnival. I think that's the hierarchy, right?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right.
So recently, I did my first gig in front of people, and in 20 plus years, and it's very surreal. I mean, when I started DJing again, somebody when I like announced that I was doing that in a comedic way, and somebody in my comments was like, my therapist recently recommended that I re-engage with the hobby I had when I was 16 years old as a therapeutic exercise.
Okay.
And it felt really right to me. Like it felt like that is good advice to reach back in time and reconnect with something that was electric and alive in you when you were a kid, especially if you've walked away from it, it's like a healing kind of interesting experience. And it has been that for me.
Oh man. I mean, there's so much in what you just said that touches on a lot of subjects that come up on this podcast a lot. I mean, one thing I talk about in terms of creativity, especially over a long career where sometimes you're passionate about it, sometimes you lose the passion, you have to re-find it. To me, it always comes back to childhood and chasing the feelings you had in childhood, figuring out how you can reconnect to that more pure, untainted, like source feeling. Was any part of that happening for you?
I should say that like, in particular, and I think this is true for everybody probably in the rave world, but in particular for me, like when I write about this in the book, I mean, just to give your listeners like a quick rundown, the book is like in 6 parts. And each part is a world that I have inhabited. It's a subculture that has kind of defined sort of the me of who I am. And each part is one part history of that world, one part memoir of my time in that world, and all parts comedy. It's sort of a comedic history look at these American subcultures. And those worlds are the two that I was born into, the two that don't quite comport to an actual subculture, which are deafness and sign language interpreting. My mom and dad and half brother and half sister, cousins, aunts, uncles, everybody in the family is deaf. Hasidic Judaism. My dad, when my mom left, my dad became like a born again Hasidic Jew. And so I would fly back from Oakland, where I'm from, on my summer vacations to go essentially cosplay as Tevye the milkman for 6 weeks a year, pretending that I knew how to exist in a Hasidic enclave of Brooklyn. And then the real subcultures of my life, which are AA and the 12 Steps. I got sober when I was 15 years old. All of my time in raves and EDM stuff, all of that was clean and sober. I was one of the only clean and sober kids in the party scene.
Which I was too, by the way. I connected with that aspect. I started going to raves around 15, 16, and I didn't go through a sober journey. I was just the nerd who didn't do drugs in general. But similar thing where I was like, oh yeah, everybody else is doing a different thing from me.
But see, I looked for people like you because I was, even though my journey into being sober was like through pain and addiction and insanity. Like when I would be at the party and that rare dork would appear, I would gravitate towards them because I would go like, it was this surreal experience. It was like, what the fuck are we doing here? You know, like we don't belong here, but we really did too. We like really did. And I make the case in the book, and I believe this strongly, that like, I don't know if this is true for you, but that I was in some ways as high as anybody there, and in some ways maybe higher, because It was doing this thing for me therapeutically or spiritually, this need, it was filling this want in my soul that I'm not saying that the kids that were on Molly didn't have that need, but I know that I did, and I was as high as anybody there. So that's raves. I was in 1995 at 8 months sober. I went to my first party, and within a year, I had thrown my first party, and within 2 years, I was throwing some of the biggest parties in San Francisco. And then I became a DJ, first a chill room DJ, and then a main room DJ, and then I became perhaps the world's first. I'm sure you didn't do this. Clean and sober ecstasy dealer when the money started to run dry.
Yeah, no, I definitely didn't do that.
Then there's Burning Man, and Burning Man, that's, I guess, scene 5. Burning Man, you know, the bridge between the rave world and Burning Man world was very short. I just heard there was a rave in the desert and went to Burning Man for the first time when I was 16 years old in 1996. And last year was my 24th time there, and I worked there for over 15 years on staff. And then finally, the world that I'm, I guess, most known for, and the reason I was able to write a book in the first place, the world of stand-up comedy, and my time in that, and how I became, I guess, the person that I am. But you asked a question about well, what did I got on a tangent? You were saying about childhood and getting back to that part of childhood.
Yeah. Well, I was asking if reconnecting with DJing was kind of scratching that itch for you. But now that you've kind of given this great summary, I'm actually more curious about, you know, your work in comedy. You mentioned probably the thing you're most known for, and your main gig, shall we say, is comedy.
Well, it's certainly not DJing.
Yet.
That's not what I'm most known for. That's right. If you hear the set, and it's available on SoundCloud, it's Moshe Kasher, and it's called Mendocino Wedding. You will hear what I've been up to these days.
You know, it's funny. I did actually listen to part of that, and I was like, I wonder if he was actually at a Mendocino wedding.
I was, in fact, at a Mendocino wedding.
I love it. I love it. But no, let me ask you this. So I was talking about the idea of like reconnecting with, you know, sort of the things that were really making your brain fire up as a kid. Have you found that with comedy over the years? Like, is there a parallel in terms of like re-inspiring yourself, refinding the love of the craft that have to do with sort of going back to the beginning?
A big part of the narrative of this whole book is that every world that I entered into, and raves were definitely included in that, I didn't just want to, and I'm sure this is a manifestation of ego, but like I didn't just want to dance. Like I did at first. You know, I went to my first party and was like, had this kind of overwhelming, life-changing, therapeutic, spiritual rebirth experience. And very quickly after that, I was like, I want to own this experience.
Yeah.
Like I don't just want to be a citizen. I want to be a prince. I want to be in the gentry. I guess in a way I wanted to be important. You know, I wanted to this thing that fired me up. I wanted to own some stake in it. And so like within about, like I said, 8 months or so of going to my first party, I was like, I want to throw my first party. And I still have the flyer for that first party. And the tagline in it, it was called Meridian. And the tagline was dedicated to taking our scene back, which is like the most hilarious thing for somebody that's been going out dancing for 8 months to be like, we got to get back to our roots, guys.
But again, let me, not to interrupt you, but there's something even in that, the purity of being that sure of yourself when you're that age. I think as an artist, you lose that as you get older. You know too much. You know that you're maybe not the one to bring it back, but because you thought you were at that time, it somehow becomes true, you know?
100%. And that's what I was going to say, is that each of these worlds, there's this heartbreaking thing that happens when you cross over the line from participant to planner, from participant to professional, where you very instantly, the thing that made you love it so much is the thing that made you want to like own it or drink a bit of it or ingest it into your soul. And you very instantly, you know, sort of a la taking the red pill or whatever. By the way, I'm fully politically red pilled, and most of this is going to be about men's rights stuff.
Goes without saying.
Once we make our pivot.
Yeah. Goes without saying.
Is that you start to feel the ugliness that is contained in every world. In every world of great beauty, there's a little side of ugliness to it. And with comedy, there's a lot, obviously. There's a lot of ugliness to it. I mean, it's a dirty business, and I love it, and I'm grateful for it. But I don't love it in the way that you love things from this kind of naive and pure perspective. I'm 20 years into comedy now, actually maybe more. And I love it, and I'm grateful for it. And it's clearly what I was born and designed to do. That's very obvious to me. But finding a way to get back to that battery recharge, kind of like, this is what I love about this thing. It becomes, and I think this is true with everything, it becomes increasingly difficult, and you have to go searching for it in different places. You have to go find that joy in different spots and in different areas, because the things, you know, that made you feel joyful about it used to be every single thing. And as you do it, you know, when you're 20 years in, and I'm sure this is true with DJing, and I'm sure I know it's true with Burning Man, and everything else, it becomes more difficult to find those spots of joy, and you have to start working harder at it.
What made you keep going back to Burning Man year after year? Like in this framework that we're talking about, have you had years where you're like, I don't want to fucking go again, and you went anyway? Well,
100%. I mean, I would say at this point, I go to Burning Man mostly for the streak. It's like being on like if you're an 11-year-old on Snapchat and you don't put a snap up, then the Snapchat will send you an alert saying, buddy, hey, what's up? Where are these snaps at? You know, that's I would say a lot of why I still go. But another part of why I still go is I had an interesting experience with Burning Man in particular. And I think that Burning Man is different than raves for me, because you can do it once a year. And so it's easier to keep it as a sort of a side part of your identity, because you don't have to be a full timer, right? But Burning Man in particular, I especially having worked there for 15 years, I worked at the gate, and it's a really fun sub department in Burning Man for a person like me, because it's kind of where the clowns landed at Burning Man. Burning Man used to have this ethic of like, you know, sort of culture fuckery and clown and practical jokery that it still kind of has, but it's becoming diminished with each passing year, as like the kind of vibe warriors and tech CEOs more and more are saying like, we're here for positive vibes. It didn't used to be about positive vibes. It used to be about all vibes, and some of them were fucking were gnarly.
Right.
But the gate kind of had that like vestigial feeling of the original fuckery of the thing. But in the end, what we were doing was searching cars and telling people that they couldn't come in. And it used to be a fun thing because Burning Man didn't used to sell out. It used to you used to have tickets available at the gate. And so it was this fun game. You know, you'd reach into a couch and you'd feel like a dreadlock and you'd go, I have discovered a hippie. And you'd like toss them out of the couch. And if the hippie was cool, I was like, you got me, brother. I'm sorry. Then you would just say, all right, you little bastard, buy a ticket, go in, tell your friends that we're watching. But if the hippie was rude and was like, I don't even know why you're charging for this shit anyway, you fucking pig, then you would start to charge it. We would call it an asshole tax.
Right.
And the price of the ticket would be directly commensurate to the degree of attitude that the guy had. And some tickets went for $1,000 or more. I mean, this is back in the day when they were cheaper. But then they started to sell out, and there were no tickets available, and the game became not a game. It became just like being a TSA agent or a psychedelic mall cop. And I was like, I'm not here for that, you know? Like, I remember I caught this old man. He was like 60 years old, an old hippie, like classic, like deadhead guy who tried to like, he waited for a dust storm to swoop in, and he had like run for the gate, like literally running, this old guy. And I was running next to him. You know, it was very Mad Max, you know, and I'm like, stop. And we're sitting on this bench and he's like near tears begging me to let him into Burning Man. And I felt something in me break, like, I don't give a fuck if this guy sneaks into Burning Man. Like, I'm not here to stop. I just don't care. And so I quit working. I was like, I just don't want to do this anymore. I had an active comedy career, and I was working at Burning Man because, again, I wanted to, like, you know, I wanted to drink a bit of that culture. And then that drink was becoming more and more poisonous. So I did this weird thing at Burning Man, which is that I was like, do I stop going? Now that this experience is like run dry, this well is dry for me, do I stop going? And I decided I wouldn't stop going, but I would try to de-evolve from professional back to participant. And I would try to find ways to manifest. It'll never be the same as it was the first few years that I went. That's not possible. You can't recreate that kind of experience. It's like the first time you shoot dope or whatever. You know, you're always like chasing that original dragon. And I was like, what if I create a new dragon? And by the way, it's Burning Man, so many people have created actual dragons.
Right.
But I was like, I'll invite people who've never been before, and I'll follow them around. Or I'll bring my wife, although that was a spectacular failure. You know, it was just like, let me reconfigure this experience to try to find joy within it again. And I've pretty successfully done that.
It's impressive, man. I mean, first of all, the streak itself is impressive. And I mean, for you at this point, like, I guess I want to give, for people who haven't been to Burning Man, like, what for you, what is the experience when you started going versus what it is now through the lens of like music? Because that's, you know, the ostensible focus of this podcast is always circling back to music. Like, were there when you first started going, was it a DJ heavy event? Was it a dance music heavy event?
Okay, so this is a matter of some, I would say, cultural significance and cultural tension, right? When I went for the first year in 1996, I heard there's a rave in the desert. And at the time, I was such a hardcore raver, like that was enough information for me to like have me pack up a 1991 Ford Escort with like 5 other rave dirt bags and like, you know, buy like 5 gallons of water and like, you know, a few cans of Dinty Moore stew and just drive to see what rave was awaiting us. And it was so, I don't know what I was expecting, but when I got there, it was no rave.
Yeah.
It was like one part Ishtar, one part Mad Max, one part Rainbow Gathering, one part rave, one part like psychedelic fuckfest, one part punk rock gathering of the Juggalos. Like, it was such a psychedelic, fucked up, fractalized, just, I could not have possibly contextualized what it was. And it blew my mind on so many levels because I wasn't ready. I thought I was going to an outdoor rave, and what I got to was like this, like the final blows of this vital spirit. I don't know if it was vital, but it felt vital, sort of societal experiment that had begun in San Francisco in the 60s with the advent of acid culture and into performance art culture. And I can go through that whole history if you want. But you asked specifically about raves. At that time, raves were a subculture within the San Francisco kind of counterculture fuckery world. Raves were one of those subcultures. And by the way, so was tech. At that time, tech, a lot of people talk about how Burning Man has become ruined by tech CEOs and infiltrating the culture and changing it and making it worse. But the reality is that's an illusion. Tech was there at the very beginning, but tech used to be cool. Tech used to be this like counterculture weirdos with mohawks and Angelina Jolie with a binary code tattoo on their arm, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it was cool.
Except none of them actually look like Angelina Jolie, but
No, nobody looked like Angelina Jolie, but they had the same haircut, and that was significant.
Yeah. No, but it's a really good point that we do. I think sometimes when we get up our own ass about being artists or creatives, it's very easy to just rag on tech and sort of these more corporate appearing entities as like ruining our fun. But it's a really good point to remember. They're probably having the same complaints, those of them who have been around long enough that like, oh, tech's not cool anymore.
No, completely. It's not that tech changed Burning Man. It's that tech changed. And since they were already there, and since they were now suddenly billionaires, they were able to alter the culture at Burning Man in a way that became more comporting to like their CEO. As I say, it became rather than going to like Fiji to do like a corporate trust fall into a bed of coals, you now go to Burning Man to rent 90 Segways and do coke off of an Estonian sex worker's back. But you're asking about raves. So raves were one of those subcultures. And they were, at the beginning, a kind of unwanted addition to the culture. And I would say to this day, that tension and that kind of ambivalence about the old, you got to think about who puts Burning Man on. At this point, they're 70 years old. They're old artists from the San Francisco scene. They did not start in the rave world. Some of them are rave people, obviously, but most of them look at it as this kind of like, I can't speak for what they really think, but it seems from the outside that they realize where their bread is buttered.
Yeah.
Most of the people that go to Burning Man go to party all night at these huge sound camps, but they don't like the music. They don't necessarily relish the fact that they're there. And there's all these complaints from those sound camps like, how come the art gets funded, but we sell 90% of the tickets and nobody funds us? Whatever on that complaint. When I first went, Rave Camp they called it the Techno Ghetto. And it was a mile outside of the city.
Oh, wow.
In its own sequestered area, like totally disconnected. This was the last year on Playa where you could drive. You were allowed to drive.
Oh, shit.
And so you would drive back and forth from the main city to the rave camp or whatever it was. And it was, like I said, it was a full mile out. And all of the sound systems, there were 3 sound systems. And they were all facing each other. Yeah. So it was really funny. It was like if you stood in the middle of this triangle, you would get this cacophonous, like, bad trip inducing, like the 3 sound systems were Wicked, who is like a legendary San Francisco house music crew, Yena and Garth and Marky and Thomas, and their special guest I remember was DJ Dimitri from Delight was there. And that was very exciting to me. Camp 2 was Goa Gill. Are you familiar with Goa Gill?
I'm familiar with Goa. I'm not familiar with Goa Gill.
Well, Goa Gill's a fascinating dude. It was Goa Gill and his crew. So it was all psychedelic trance. And I always said, if you ever go to a psychedelic trance party, in the 90s anyway, an outdoor party, the attendees looked like they hadn't arrived at the party, but had emerged from the ground beneath the party. Yeah. Like they all looked like they belonged to the earth.
Like a manhole opens up and they crawl out.
Yes. Or like in the orcs coming up from the ground in Lord of the Rings. Like they just looked like they were of the earth. And Goa Gill was a really fascinating DJ. He was, I think, one of the first big Goa DJs in the world. He's an old guy. And he's from the hippie era. He's a Grateful Dead era hippie who had ported over into becoming a Goa trance DJ in Goa. He was an old white hippie with dreads, and he mixed Goa on cassette. He was a cassette DJ.
Amazing.
And he would just like, the mixes were, I guess non-existent, but they're awesome. I'm not a big psychedelic trance fan, but you should check him out. They're on YouTube, some of his mixes. He died, I think, last year. But they had created like a big alien pyramid that by the end of the weekend, they lit on fire, and they didn't have like a burn platform under it. So they just like, there was this like seared char of national protected nature land, just like, this like Goa shaped. It was probably a fractal, I would guess, because it's Goa. And then the third sound system was Spaz, which is a super underground, kind of legendary San Francisco, like mega DIY, like a real rave, like, just, cut a padlock off of a warehouse, kind of like weird music, extreme bizarro music, but electronic, glitchy, just weirdo shit. So that was your choices. You had 3 choices, and they were all facing each other, and you could walk from one to the other. And that was what raves were. And obviously they've become big business at Burning Man since then. Things have changed a lot. And now you have like these elaborate camps that look like they're set design from like the Matrix movies, these like huge parties with the world's biggest DJs. But in the very beginning, that's what it was. It was those 3 camps, and you had to be standing in front of the speaker to hear a pure version of the music and not have bleed over from Goa Gil.
Dude, I love... It's so funny to me, and I didn't know this part of it, that they had kept the rave part separate, and that you'd have to like go to a little shanty town to see it. That is so funny to me, because that's I think some history that really is telling about how far raves and dance music have come, in that they were the unclean even for Burning Man at the time. That to me,
they were they were an annoying addition to what they thought was like a culture jamming, like art fest or whatever they thought it was. They couldn't say no, but they definitely didn't say yes. So they just did their thing.
Yeah. Which is so funny, because there's reflections of that in popular culture now. And I say this as somebody who has been a professional DJ my entire adult life, but they were, even back then, they were right that DJs are kind of annoying. That even back then, and that remains true to this day. It's grown so big, but there's something about it that's like, it is sort of a silly, annoying thing to spend your time doing in a fun way.
Well, here's the good news. I don't know if it's good news, but here's the comforting news. Culture jamming performance artists, they're also a bit annoying.
Yeah, that's also true. That's absolutely right. But okay, so you were talking about Goa Gil, and he was mixing on tape decks. Makes me want to ask you, what did you start DJing on, and how did you learn to DJ?
Okay, well, like I said, I went to parties and I had this sort of transformative experience, and the first person that I saw that I go, where is God? I was like, there he is. There she is. God is the DJ. And I'm like, I want to be a demigod. And I bought, after my first party, I remember the first turntables I had were belt-driven, I think Vestax turntables. And very quickly realized that wasn't going to work. The second set, after the second party, I had enough, and I bought 2 Technics 1200s, and I had, and I did not know what I was doing, but I was at a great advantage to other young DJs, which is that my mother is deaf. And so I was able to, while living with my mom, learn to DJ train wreck with abandon, with my mother happily looking on with absolutely no knowledge of the horrors that were happening under her roof. And that was where I started. I started as a chill room DJ because you didn't really... I mean, I learned later that if you're a good ambient DJ, you're probably in some ways a better DJ than a main room DJ, because if you're actually matching ambient sounds in a real way, and I got there, but at first I just thought all you have to do is like, do a swooping kind of mix with an atmospheric or, a dolphin singing or something, and then you're good. And so that was one of the weirdest ironies, is when I started DJing, the main place I was DJing, I was this clean and sober kid, and the main place that I was DJing was the chill room. The place where, ostensibly most of the people in there had come there because they were just a little bit too high to stay in the main room any longer without freaking out about what death is. and they would come in and have me, this guy that was going to AA meetings during the week, guide them sonically through their, peaking on their candy flip or whatever.
I mean, for you, it's such an interesting, I'm a little all over the place here. And, for anybody listening, I really want to encourage them to go out and read the whole book, because your whole journey, it's way too much for one podcast, but it's very interesting to me that you sort of went through this drug and alcohol phase very young, got sober very young, and then almost immediately thereafter launched into the rave scene, which especially in the 90s was almost entirely known for drugs. And, you mentioned that like it sort of got you high on its own, and I completely relate to that feeling. It's a feeling I still chase to this day, but there's something in it. Like, do you think it was sort of just a perfectly timed replacement for you? Like, did it make staying sober easier in a way?
Well, here's the issue with getting sober so young. I mean, I was so young. I'd been in and out of rehab since I was 13, and my whole world was like I was from Oakland, and everybody wanted to be a gangster. That was like what we looked to. The music I listened to growing up was like gangster rap, West Coast gangster rap, and like all the kids that I grew up with, we were all white, but none of us wanted that to be the case. Does that make sense?
Oh, of course.
It's like
Are we talking about like, is this like Mac Dre E40 era, or was that later?
Mac Dre, E40, Spice One, Too Short, Mac Mall, Herm Lewis, Drew Down, the Loonies. Like these are Snoop Dogg. These are like the people that these were my role models, and they are not good. Although Snoop kind of is now. He's like a church guy. At the time, there was a lot of I get it. He comes and goes. It depends on what week you catch him.
That's exactly right.
But this was like, this was the world. I mean, it was obviously an identity crisis. I'm not claiming I had some kind of like sincere or genuine connection to the culture, but in some ways I did. I mean, it was the 90s, and that's just what people in my community listened to, in the community of white people that wish they were anything but. So that's the world that I came from. And I got sent to rehab really early. And then, it's a long story that is told in the book, but I by the way, like my friends back then, I'll just give you an example of who my friends were. There was a night where we were all out drinking, and my friend, there was a new kid that was hanging out with us. We drank. The way we decided what to drink was if a gangster rapper rapped about it, we would drink it. So it was gin and juice. It was Cisco, Mad Dog. I mean, it was just all this like cosplaying. It was all cosplaying as like we're real gangsters, And this new kid had come around to hang out with us. And my friend was we were all drunk on malt liquor, and my friend was beating him up, this new kid. He's beating him up. And I run over and I go, "Hey, my friend, don't beat up the new guy. Leave him alone." And I like grab my friend's shoulder, and he turns around and he's like, "You grabbing me?" And he beats me up. He punches me in the face. And I like grabbed my eye and ran off crying. I was always like one punch away from a cry, which made like being kind of a hardcore gangster a little bit difficult. But so I'm crying and weeping and running off. And I go sit in an alley and drink some more, crying. And my friend who just punched me in the face walks over to the alley, and he's crying now. And he's like, "Dude, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to beat you up, man. I didn't mean to beat you up, G." And I go, and I'm grabbing my eye, and I go, "You're damn right. Why'd you do that? Fuck you." And he goes, "Fuck me." And he beats me up again. He starts beating me up during apologizing for beating me up. So anyway, this is the world that I came from.
Yeah.
And I started to go through this like addictive spiral where I couldn't quit. And then finally, I'll spare you the details, but finally I asked for help in an AA meeting, and that help was there for me. And I got sober, but I decided that, or I just knew that like my life was over. I'm 15 years old, and it's the kind of knowledge that only a 15-year-old with very little life experience can come to. It's like, I won't ever have anything fun to do again, because the only thing that I've ever done that's fun is this world where I'm getting beaten up and there's violence and I'm getting arrested. But it's the only thing that's ever made me feel like okay. Even though it's anything but okay, it's enough okay that I'm fucked, I give up, I'm out, but I'll live, right? And, so I got sober, and I'm the youngest person by 5 or 10 years in any meeting I ever go to. And, it's like, what are we doing? It's Saturday night. And it'd be like a Vietnam vet going like, recovery bowling, come along, little buddy. I mean, that's the world that I'm looking at. And I'm like, this is fucking awful. My life is over. What do I do? And then, I got sober long enough to kind of look up from this broken sort of minefield of a life that I had to go, oh, wait, I can do like everything else. I can do any other thing. I have the entire world of experiences at my hand, and I didn't realize that those things were a possibility for me. And it was with that kind of, because I was still a young person and I wanted to like go do young person things, but I didn't know where to go because the world I'd come from was so fraught and filled with violence. I knew I couldn't go back to that, but I didn't know where I would go next. And I randomly saw a flyer on a telephone pole in Oakland for this party called Cyberfest 95. And I remembered I had seen this like 2020 news thing about like the new scary ecstasy parties that are infiltrating warehouses around the country. And I remembered it seemed cool, but I was too broke and too busy being a gangster, fake gangster to, spend $20 on some soft techno shit.
Yeah.
But now I was a new guy. I mean, I wasn't a new guy, but I was trying to become a new guy. And so I bought a ticket to that party. I don't know why. I don't know what it was, but I was like, I'm going to go to that and I'm going to go alone. And I did. I went by myself to that first party and I can tell you about it, but I had like I had a really wild transformative experience.
Well, I guess my question to start off this little part of the chat, when you go to a warehouse party in the Bay Area in the mid 90s, who's playing and what kind of music are you hearing when you walk in?
Okay, well, I can't answer that for the first party. I've since looked back at that flyer to realize like Carl Cox was playing.
Oh, wow.
Well, that's cool. I might have heard Carl Cox. I don't know what I was doing.
Of course.
I didn't know I didn't know what kind of music I was listening to. I can tell you what kind of music when I started to become a real like aficionado, what was going on. I can answer that.
Yeah, like what kept you there? What got you stoked to like dive deeper in musically?
Well, part of it was definitely what happened at that first party. But musically, I remember the second party I went to was a Wicked full moon party, the same crew that was up at Burning Man. Wicked used to do these parties on the beach or in the woods around San Francisco on every full moon. They were kind of a legendary party. And, what I walked into at Cyberfest was like rave. It was like, like almost classic rave, big lasers and like, da, 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 like almost a cliche of what rave would
Mortal
be.
Kombat theme song, yeah.
Exactly. And people dressed as Raiden.
Right.
It wasn't just the music. We were all involved in some Mortal Kombat. But when I got to that second party, it was, I believe DJ Garth was the one playing. Garth and Yena were like the two kind of guys, and Dub Tribe and Thomas and Tony, and I don't know if people recognize these names or not, but it was that psychedelic disco sound that San Francisco had become sort of underground famous for. It was deep music, and it wasn't, I guess in a way it was deep house, but it was deep and it was dubby and it was dark and lush and disco-y, but in this way that was really druggy in the best way.
Right.
Druggy in a way that's like, because when I wrote this chapter, I went back and I wrote 90% of this chapter listening to mixtapes from that era, which are a lot of them are on YouTube, which was really pretty cool. And I was like, I felt almost transported back to those spaces. So that's what that was about, and that's what San Francisco was about. There was a real strong kind of hippie house thing going on.
Just to point out, like that's something that I don't think really exists anywhere anymore. Like there was an era where different regions actually sounded different. And to some extent, at least in rap, that still exists to some extent, but it's because we're all so connected and you can hear something immediately and copy it wherever you are. Like I grew up in Minnesota, and the Midwest had like a strong techno scene and a strong hardcore scene.
Yeah.
And
totally, and by the way, it wasn't just techno, and you know this better than me, but it wasn't just techno. It was Midwest techno.
Yes.
It was a techno of, so like we didn't just have house in San Francisco, it was San Francisco house.
Exactly.
It had its particular, it was a different sound. And yes, totally. Los Angeles was hardcore and breaks. And then there was like desert breaks, which was its own its own thing, you know, like, and that's such a cool observation that I haven't even thought about, that with the tentacles of the internet kind of making music so accessible to everybody, that those regional separations don't exist in the same way. And then, there was like Florida breaks, and then there was, you know, I mean, some of them became genres, right? Like Chicago house. I can play Chicago house in Los Angeles and it's still sounding like Chicago house, but like but nobody knows. Not nobody, but I feel like the idea of Midwest techno, you had to have been there.
That's the
Woody
thing.
McBride, that's a name, right? Is it Woody McBride?
Oh, Woody McBride. Yeah, Woody McBride. Shout out to Woody McBride, who, by the way, is still a major dance music promoter in Minnesota. Probably the biggest. Like he evolved.
Oh, that's cool.
He's still doing it. He's doing big, like, you know, corporate raves with Insomniac and all that now. But yeah, he made it out, man. But yeah, I saw him play so many fucking times.
That's funny. That's funny. He made it out to be a 45-year-old rave promoter. He didn't make it that far out. He's still pretty in.
I mean, as far as the people he was around, I feel like not all of them own a house. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Absolutely. No. Point taken.
But man, okay, I have to say, this is not related to anything. I just have to say it because it's been rattling in my brain. I need to get it out. You mentioned you were drinking everything the rappers were talking about in the songs. And it just gave me a realization I don't think I've ever had before. No one tells you when you're young, all the drinks rappers talk about in songs are gross. They're all bad.
Oh, 100%.
It's so crazy.
You know how you know that acutely? You know how you know that acutely is you stay sober into adulthood. And then you go, wait, I've never had an old fashioned.
Right.
What? I had sex on the beach from a can that said club on it. Like that's the closest to a craft cocktail I ever had. It sucked. I wish I had a more refined experience.
I mean, I remember like when the era of like Incredible Hulks, which is Hennessy and Hypnotic mixed together. That is like the most cloying.
That sounds a little past my time.
I mean, yeah, it may have been, but it's all the same. It's the most cloying, gross. I don't know. Anyway, there's not related. We don't have to talk about it.
But this is related. Since you're asking me sonically, there was something musically that happened, I do think, and I talk about it in the book, that drew me to raves. It wasn't just a pure accident of chance and walking by a telephone pole. One of the only things that you can do when you're young and clean and sober is something called an AA or an NA dance. And for the first 6 months of sobriety, every single Saturday night, I would go to the AA dance, right? I would go, there was one every week in a different suburb around San Francisco, and you would follow the AA dance. And as I say in the book, I go to describe an AA dance to the uninitiated. Picture the heyday of Studio 54, right? Just the pumping disco energy of Studio 54. Picture the electronic music tent at Coachella, where the headlining band is over and all of the people who are stuffed into that tent are there to just squeeze a little bit more magic out of their night, right? Picture that. You got that picture, everybody listening? All right. Now, the AA dance is the exact opposite of that. It is... Picture now a Vietnam vet on an emphysema oxygen tank shaking his tail feather to It's Raining Men with a former sex worker in a wheelchair. That's kind of more the energy that we're dealing with. And I would go every week to these AA dances. And one of the things about being a wannabe, a white wannabe, is that the most vulnerable position you can find yourself in as a white wannabe is dancing. Because you can pretend you're not white all you want, but when the rhythm is when they're asking you to dance rhythmically, you will expose your two white men can't jump, two left feet immediately. And so what I would do at these AA dances is I would stand on the wall and I would kind of like nod my head and do what I call the butt clench dance, where I would just like clench my butt to the beat and just sort of nod and try and look cool, right? I'm 15 years old and I'm butt clenching. And one of those nights, 100% pure love, Crystal Waters, came on at this like glorified bar mitzvah dance. And I remember feeling like, I don't know what this music is exactly, but like I wasn't dancing, but I was doing like a little bit more than clenching my butt. There was something in the like that 4/4 beat and the house lyrics that were like pulling this little primordial softy out of me, you know, and like I moved just a little. So I think that there was something musically that was drawing me kind of Pied Piper style to that first party.
Well,
when I went into that first party,
okay.
Yeah.
No, I just wanted to real quick,
No,
let me ask you, you tell me if this is too much of a reach of a connection, but do you think like having a familiarity with the deaf community, your parents being deaf, in some subconscious way played into that attraction towards dance music? Because, you know, dance music is body music, it's physical music. And I mean, have known deaf people who love going to raves because you can actually feel it, you know?
No, I would take it a step further and say there's perhaps, this is purely observational, there's perhaps no musical scene that speaks more to deaf people than the raves, specifically because of what you're talking about. That if you're at a party, not only is the music made in a way that hearing is important, obviously, it's the most important part of music, but feeling is really important too. And the sound systems are so big, I would say comedically big, I would say perhaps dangerously big, that we're all suffering from some damage from back then, that you can have a visceral experience of dancing to specifically house and techno, you know, more than dubstep or trap or breaks. Specifically that 4/4 kind of beat is accessible to deaf people. I don't know if it's what drew me to it, but I think one thing I can say is having deaf parents, I didn't have a musical upbringing in the way that a lot of kids do, where their parents introduce them to the music of their youth, and from there they extrapolate or they reject and they say, we don't want that hippie shit, we want punk shit. It was like everything was wide open, and so I'm sure that there's some connection there.
Yeah. It's just fascinating to me, man. I feel like, there's so much in that. Well, you know, I don't want to go too long here. I want to let you get out of here. But before we go, can you briefly tell the tale of how you went from a young teenager learning how to DJ to, in a few years, throwing some of the biggest raves in the Bay Area?
Well, that was a complicated, weird journey that I went in. Like originally what I wanted to do, what I was enamored of, and you tell me, but I feel like this doesn't exist. Maybe it does. All through the book, in particular in this chapter, I'm grappling with this question of like, does this not exist anymore? Or am I so old that it exists, but I can't even see it by staring at it? Like it exists in some other form. And as I say in the book, like I'm like a Bill Haley and his Comets fan listening to Black Sabbath and going like, that's not rock and roll, you know, like maybe this does exist.
It definitely does. I will say it does for sure still exist. It's just, I think it's, because I'm a bit older too, and it's some parts of it are unrecognizable when you've already experienced it once. But I think it's probably the same for comedy or anything else. There's just cycles. It just repeats itself over and over. Completely.
Yeah, and as I talk about in the book, like the cycle of all culture is that someone invents something, you know, and there's finances involved in it too that are kind of, there's like a sad cycle of finance. Like, you know, Jesse Saunders does not have as much money as David Guetta, our hero. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like that's sort of how it works. Like this guy started it. You know, believe it or not, I'm sure you guys talk a lot about MMA on this podcast as well.
Constantly.
I'm sure there's a real porting between, I'm sure you are always bringing that up. Same thing. Like the pioneers of that sport are, you know, living in a trailer, you know, and the fighters now are multimillionaires, like, and they fought in like a barn in front of like 14 yokels, and now they're in Abu Dhabi fighting in front of 60,000 people. Like the same thing's true in what we were doing. And by the way, you know, I wasn't there at the beginning. I was, as I say in the book, I was there at the beginning of the end, like when raves took that turn from being a mystery that no one had heard of, Like I feel like I entered the last mysterious year. It's same thing with Burning Man, actually. Like before it cracked above the Earth's surface and became this kind of ubiquitous thing where rave DJs and EDM DJs are some of the biggest stars in the world, you know? And that's not bad. It's not good. It's the way things are, that somebody invents something and then the next generation reinvents it and the next generation reinvents it until eventually it becomes almost unrecognizable to the inventor in the first place. But at the time, there was a very stark differential between underground parties and massives. That was like, this was the dichotomy. The first party I went to was a massive. The second was decidedly an underground. And I wanted to throw these underground parties because that was where that's where I felt that love. And like, I've thought a lot about this since I wrote the book. Like, I was from such a place of being devoid of love and softness that what spoke to me once I got there was that people on Molly are like a caricature. It's like a cartoon character of love. It's like, I don't even need to know you to know that I love you. Here, let me hug you. Let's get in this cuddle puddle and rub each other. We met 30 seconds ago. That feels like the right thing to do. And part of that is like eye roll inducing, but part of that is like super powerful, which is like, I needed to go to like a love society that they were on the love drug to make me feel like loved for the first time. And I felt that in such a stark way, like that it really reconfigured me. I mean, I literally, after that first party, I got rid of all my old clothes. I reinvented myself physically. I bleached my hair blonde. I started wearing glitter in my hair and barrettes, and I got a pacifier, not because of the reason people use pacifiers, by the way, which is they don't want to grind their teeth on Molly. I got it because I thought it looked cool.
Right.
So it was a big kind of transformation for me. And so anyway, I wanted to throw these parties where we would take our scene back. And I threw my first party. It was called Meridian. I went up to this guy in AA who I knew had money. He was like a bar mitzvah DJ. And I go, just give me the money to throw a party and I'll give you all of the profits. All.
Nice.
100%. And he's like, sounds good. Like, I was like, in writing the book, I was thinking about that guy. I go, how unethical do you have to be to have like a 16-year-old newly clean and sober kid make you an offer where he makes zero money, works like hundreds of hours, and you're just like, sounds good, little friend. Like, but it was okay. I didn't care about the money. The party was $5 before 11 p.m., $7 after, April 27th, 1996.
What venue? Where was it?
I'm glad you asked. It was a Virgin location. Now, I don't think people talk about that anymore, do they?
No, they don't.
People were obsessed back then with popping the cherry of a corrugated steel warehouse. It was like, that's how you could really get people. You could have a good lineup. You could promise fun things. But also, if no one had ever been in the warehouse before, now that was something special.
Yeah.
So it was a Virgin location south of Market in San Francisco. And it was the first thing I'd ever done right. I mean, I should have negotiated myself a better contract, but it was the first thing that I successfully did. I did it. And I remember walking around that room, that party, and I was like, I felt like I had accomplished something, you know? I was like, I had dropped out. I had flunked ninth grade at that point, I think 3 times. I was an 8th grade dropout. I was like, been arrested more times than I could count. I was just this little fucking shithead. And I'd never even graduated from a rehab. But here I was like throwing this party and everybody was like blissed out and having this great time. And I just felt so proud of myself. Like it was like, this is what I want to do. And so I kept throwing these parties and they kept getting shut down by the cops, but whatever. You know, I remember one party we threw, one Meridian, we did, I think 4 locations. We started in a warehouse, got busted by the cops. We moved to another warehouse, got busted by the cops. Then we just started moving from forest to forest. And finally we were like 2 hours away from the original party. And it was like 6 o'clock in the morning and somebody finally started playing music. But this guy pulled me aside one day, and I had become this DJ too. I had started DJing at parties and playing in these chill rooms. And this guy, actually similar to what we were talking about earlier, he was clean and sober too, but not like, he was like you. He just wasn't a drug guy.
Yeah.
And he had heard that I was throwing parties and that I wasn't on drugs, and that he liked my DJing, and he came up to me and basically said, I'll put you under my wing and I'll make you like my number 2 rave man, and you'll be like the CFO and I'll teach you everything I know, and I'll put you on every party I ever throw, and I'll like eventually give you the keys to my rave kingdom, and I'll teach you how to be a massive rave man. And so that's what I started doing. I started following this guy around and throwing these bigger and bigger parties that got more and more massive. And he was a really interesting guy. He threw these parties in San Francisco that were much more ornate and elaborate than the other parties at the time. He would do these like games with the community where he'd emboss the flyer with gold. And every 1,000th flyer had a gold embossed font on it. And if you found that flyer, you got in free to the party. So it was like a golden ticket situation. And we would make these like really ornate like altars that required hundreds of hours of being on a forklift, hanging these like, fluorescent mannequins above the DJ booth. And like, it was just, he was doing things on a different scale than anybody else in San Francisco was doing. And so I was like the second coolest guy all of a sudden in the entire rave scene. I was suddenly the man. And that felt really cool. But then the party started getting bigger and bigger. And then they threw a party called Planet Rock, which was the biggest party I think that anyone had ever attempted in San Francisco at that time. The Cool World parties were pretty damn big also. And Funky Techno Tribe was the other big one. But this was trying to do something new. They booked Africa Bambaataa and Grandmaster Flash to DJ. And that was a new idea in San Francisco, at least, of like, let's get someone from another genre. And so it became this big, massive party. I don't know, 10,000 people, which I don't think is that massive anymore. But at the time, it was like huge, bigger than anything anybody had ever seen. And I remember I was at that party, and there's this, more people wanted to come than we had space for. And there was this like horde at the gates who couldn't get in. And it felt like a refugee camp. Like they were like, let us in. And I remember I was at the gate and I was going like, I'm still this like underground guy. I'm just like, come on guys, this isn't who we are. Plur, everybody, remember Plur? And then as I screamed that, the gate buckled and like 2,000 people like streamed toward me. And I go, okay, I guess I don't remember Plur. Yeah. And I ran as fast as I could into this, into the like production office, and somebody else came in and go, this 16-year-old chick just OD'd on GHB. I think she's dead. And I was just like, and I go, what am I it was another experience like with that guy at Burning Man. I just go, I don't know what I'm doing anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm doing this. And I don't know what this is. It's not the thing that I loved it. And I don't know. And so then I started this like slow process of a very slow process of extricating itself. Now it helped. I know this is a long story,
no, I love
but it helped that party lost thousands of dollars. And back then, rave promoters were like living hand to mouth. This was not Insomnia or EDC where, you have like a slush fund and an operating budget going into 2027. It was like, if you lost money at one party, you weren't throwing the next party. And at the end of that, the girl didn't die, by the way. The girl lived. The girl who lived.
Good note. Glad to hear.
Yes. But I definitely was like, I got into this to like love on this thing that had healed me. And now I don't know what, I'm throwing concerts where people are ODing. Like, I don't even understand what I'm doing. And then the guy who had pulled me aside, my rave father, he was like, we need to throw one more party. But this time, I'm going to be out of the scene, and it's going to be you. And I'm such a naive, like I'm constantly getting conned by these powerful men. I'm going, really? It's my own party? He goes, yeah, this one's for you. But the profits are going to go to paying back the investors from all the money I lost. I go, oh, okay, but it's me. Oh, yeah, it's you. And I go, oh, great. And then I remember it was thrown by my production company only, the people that brought you Meridian, Bay Area Underground it was called. And he put a version of my credo, remember, dedicated to taking our scene back. It was dedicated to paying to taking our scene back and paying what's owed.
Oh God.
I was just like, I didn't even see it. I go, cool, it's almost my slogan. And that was a party called Pangea. And it was a really simple, big party, couple thousand people, but a simple and really nice and really beautiful and very successful. And all that money went directly to his investors. And then he skipped town and I never saw him again. And then everything dried up. My rave daddy was gone. And with that, I slowly stopped being able to play at parties. And I started to resent this thing so much. And because I couldn't play at the underground parties anymore because I had like affiliated myself with the like dirty massives.
Right.
And I couldn't play at the massives anymore because my big massive con artist pimp daddy was gone. And so things started to kind of like wither and dry up. I started to get more and more resentful because I thought I wanted to do this for a living, you know, and I wanted to do this for the rest of my life, but it wasn't happening. And then it'd be a month that would go by and I wouldn't get a gig, then 2 months, then 3 months. And I was just getting more resentful and there was no joy, right. You know, I had lost the joy. And this weird thing happened, which is I looked at a flyer one day, deep in my resentful phase, and there was a DJ on there called Moshe. My DJ name was Moshe. And there was a DJ on the flyer called Moshe. Moshe.
Right.
I go, what the fuck? Moshe? Just E? You can't add an E to... I can't be Mick Jagger and go to Altamont to play a concert. Like, what the fuck is going on? So I'm like so filled with indignity. I go to this party with all these rave flyers that I'd been on over the years, and I find Moshe. And I go, Are you Moshe? And he goes, yeah, that's me. And I go, well, I'm fucking Moshe. And I'm an established DJ. Look, here I am at this party. Here I am at that party. And he's like, cool, man. And I go, well, what's up with the name? Like, are you Jewish? Is it your Hebrew name? And he goes, no, I'm not Jewish. I just thought it sounded cool. I go, fuck yeah, it sounds cool. It's my cool sounding name. And I go, dude, you got to drop the name. Like, I'm the established guy. You got to drop the name. And he goes, no, I think I'll just keep it. I go, no, you can't keep it. Right. It's my name. And he goes, and I go, I'll battle you for it. I'll battle you for it. We'll take it old school electric boogaloo style and we'll throw down records and he goes, no, I'll keep the name. Now I'm like, what do I do? Like, I can beat Moshe to death or I can just accept what is and walk away. So that's what I did. I impotently like scraped up my rave flyers and walked away. Now, and I stopped DJing very soon thereafter. And I never saw Moshe on a flyer again.
Of course. My
hand to God, I never saw his name again. And I am not convinced to this day that Moshe, whether he was a real DJ or just like a guardian angel sent from the heavens to like lube my path out of the electronic music world and on to what was to become my real destiny.
I mean, yeah, it's a beautiful story, man. And it's, the whole thing's amazing. People got to go get the book. I really enjoyed it. I don't know, man. I feel maybe I'm reading too much into it, but like talking to you, reading the book, I feel like there is still some fire in your belly for DJing, for dance music. And I hope you continue pursuing it in some way.
No, there is because like I said, like I wrote, first of all, this chapter is a love letter and it's the first. And it's like it's a thank you to this scene that I don't know what it was that happened. We're waiting for me inside the Henry J. Kaiser Convention Center in Oakland, or on that beach in San Francisco, or in those warehouses that we broke into, or all of these things inside of these spaces, these most like incongruous of spaces. And that was what was so beautiful about raves back then, was part of the thing was we don't belong here physically.
Yes.
But here we are creating this thing spiritually and manifesting this thing that hidden inside of those warehouses was an elixir just as healing as I found in AA, just as meaningful as I found in Burning Man, just as permanent of a shift for me as any of the worlds that I've been living in. And it was contained inside of these temporary warehouses where you go there Saturday night and you're in heaven. You go there Sunday morning and it's just an empty space. But I had brought with me from that empty space this shift that had occurred. And that shift was permanent. And this was the first chapter of the book that I started writing. Before I even had a conception of this book as a 6-part examination of these worlds I lived in, I was just writing about my years in the dance scene in San Francisco. And I wrote it in this way that felt creatively like I got to get this out of me, which I think all artists can kind of relate to. Like one night I was like, I should write this, and it started to pour out of me. And I wrote the whole chapter, like I said, listening to these old mixtapes. And at the end of that, I thought, I'm going to buy a controller and I'm going to go back. Now that my ego's gone, I mean, my ego's huge with comedy, but my ego around DJing, Moshe stamped it out of me, and I had 20 years away from it, that I got to reapproach DJing and electronic music from this like really interesting anthropological perspective of like, I haven't listened to this stuff religiously in a long time. I mean, I still danced every year at Burning Man, but I didn't really go out. Let me see what I'm into.
Yeah.
Like, let me see what turns me on, and let me see what it sounds like, and let me see if I even know how to DJ anymore. And I will tell you this: beat matching I remembered, scratching I had forgotten. I'm much. It's a lot harder to stay savvy with scratching than with mixing, and I love it because it's like a meditation practice for me. I go up to my office and I do a mix. And my wife really, really does not care for it. She asked me once, she goes, are you DJing at me? Like, is it an attack? I go, no. Unfortunately, I didn't marry a deaf woman, so she can hear everything I do.
To fucking say, yeah, it's like the one mistake you made.
Yeah. I should have married a deaf woman, but that's too close for comfort.
No, of course.
But yeah, you're right. I still love it. I've discovered in it, like, what I love, and it's interesting because it's like, I'm not dancing. I'm not going out dancing. And so now it's like, it's a much more like personal experience. It's a much more like just me. And now my kid will come in sometimes and she'll fuck around on the decks, and like, who knows? Maybe she'll be the next David Guetta. Maybe she'll be solving the water crisis and the looming climate crisis with just a really fat beat drop.
Yeah. She'll, wherever he gets to, she'll pick up the torch from there.
That's right, little baby Guetta.
Yeah. I also love that you got a blurb from the Chainsmokers on the book too. That's just a great little thing because
that was Well, I was lucky because one of the things about getting blurbs is all of the worlds that I've lived in, and I've thought about this a lot, like all the worlds that I've lived in, I'm still in it to one degree or another. And I guess you could say I'm still in the rave DJ thing by virtue of going backwards and starting that again. But I don't have connections in the rave world. Like, I knew Burning Man is easy because I know people that have gone to Burning Man that are significant. Nick Kroll and I went to Burning Man together one year, so he was nice enough to blurb it. Comedy, that's easy. The deaf world, I'll always be affiliated with it. The Jewish world, I got people in that world. The rave thing, I had walked away when Moshe humiliated me at that warehouse 20 years ago. And I go, I don't know anybody. Like, I don't know anyone anymore. And randomly, I was like, maybe it'll work out. And randomly, out of nowhere, the Chainsmokers head of production contacted me about this movie that they were writing, or that was, I don't want to give their secrets away, but it was about something that I know a lot about.
Right.
And I was like, I think this is the thing. This is the sign. And I gladly did notes for them for that project for free. And at the end, I made my little ask, and they were gracious enough to say yes. So I got very lucky. That felt very sort of magical in a weird way.
Absolutely. And there's connections in that too. I mean, first of all, I love the Chainsmokers. They're great guys. Shout out to the Chainsmokers. But I feel like there's connections in the like underground versus mainstream dynamic we've been talking about too, where somehow you reconnected with this like new form of dance music via a blurb from the Chainsmokers.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's like I examine that journey a lot in the book. To me, that is the story. It's what we were talking about, is the recreation. And for me, looking at it now, 20 years later, driving down the Sunset Strip, and like there's billboards for the DJ that's at the Wynn in Vegas that weekend. Like when I went to Burning Man and saw DJ Dimitri in 1996, I was like, I'm in front of a superstar.
Yeah.
Like, this was as big as it could possibly ever get. There was no conception that any of us had, I think, back then, of like a real superstar. The only thing it could be is a rave superstar. It was Sasha or John Digweed or Moby or Carl Cox. And then all of a sudden from that thing cracked this, the thing that you and I found in your warehouse in Minneapolis and I found in my warehouses in San Francisco, like that sonic thing that trickled into our ears and changed us. Well, it doesn't belong to us. Like, it belongs to whoever gets tickled by that thing and whoever gets shifted and whoever learns how to dance and whoever's body it moves. And so I think like the story of electronic dance music becoming one of the biggest music forms in the world, like, I couldn't have seen it, but obviously in retrospect, it was inevitable. So here we are.
Yeah, I love that, man. You're right, because once you feel it, it's the most obvious feeling in the world, and you immediately need more of it. And makes sense that other people would have that same experience if you really break it down.
But we also loved, I'm sure you relate to this, I also loved the fact that people hated it.
Sure.
I loved the fact that you didn't get it, because it didn't mean I was into something stupid. It meant that I had been let in on a secret that you couldn't understand. You were staring at my digital world with analog eyes. You couldn't get what I was getting because you hadn't been let in on the secret. And that, to me, is the story of this whole book, is that my whole life was spent feeling like these like Harry Potter, Narnia kid style people, these like friendless, weak losers who all of a sudden discovers a doorway or a wardrobe or a warehouse, and you walk in and you're like, oh my God, like there's another universe that was hiding right underneath me, and I belong here. I found my people here, and I have superpowers here. And that's definitely what I discovered through dance music, was this feeling of superpower. I was cute. I could dance. I could flirt with girls. I could feel the music. I could DJ. I could be creative. It like shifted me in this way that I will be grateful for until the day I die.
Yeah. I always say I always felt the most myself in those environments. Like I didn't realize that I wasn't being the most myself in other places until I went there, and I was like, oh, wow, like this is what actual, self-identity feels like. And that's a really powerful feeling.
It's a powerful feeling. And like, the way that I describe specifically what happened to me in raves is that there was, I had this chronically violent childhood, and then I go into this place where everybody's on the love drug, but they're not just on the love drug, they're also dressed like infants.
Right.
Like they're literally dressed like children. They have barrettes and pacifiers and candy necklaces, and I used to bring this monkey puppet with me to parties, and I would like monkey puppet it up.
You
and
were
like
the puppet guy.
And and it's stupid. For a while, I was the puppet guy.
Every city has a puppet guy. That's amazing.
No. I reject your characterization of me as the puppet guy. I brought a puppet. It was incidental.
Okay.
But that, okay. And as stupid and like laughter inducing as it is, like for me, it was deep and profound and powerful, because what I was doing was I was stealing a second childhood out of this place where none was promised to me. And I was getting this sort of runway to restart my life in this soft way, and all that gangster shit was like so gone, and that you can't stay puppet guy. I mean, I guess you can, but like you're going to be kind of a sad loser. You're not going to make it out.
Rough road, yeah.
It's a rough road to be 45-year-old puppet guy. But if you're 15-year-old like wannabe gangster guy, and then you're 17-year-old puppet guy, you can eventually swing back to be like regular guy that isn't haunted by the demons of the violence of your past, and isn't like seduced by the kind of druggy, like, hypnosis of the rave. Now I am, I think, the person that I am because I was able to swing between these things. That softness, it really, really healed me. And I definitely is, I have raves and dance music to thank for that.
It's beautiful, man. I mean, I think the only thing left to say is, do you have what fills that role for you now? Do you have an escape or a passion that doesn't have to do with your work that fulfills you in that way?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about this, like, what is the theme of this book? There's a lot of themes. One of them is like destiny is something that becomes clear to you when you get further down the road and then you look backwards. That's the only way to see destiny because it was inevitable because here you are. But the other big theme is like, why was I doing this through all these worlds? Why was I so enamored of all these worlds? And some of it is healing, but some of it is drugs. You know, it really is like I was trying to get high on the rave scene. I mean, I literally did. I was trying to get high on Burning Man. I'm trying to get high on stage. Like part of it is that, but part of it is also like my religion, you know, is fun. You know, I mean, I'm Jewish, but that's more cultural. Like my real religion is like fun and experiences. I describe it like as I die, I want to squeeze out the last drop of life. Yeah. Like my final moment. It's like, but as you get older, you know, fun it becomes this shifting thing and it becomes soft for me anyway. It's become softer and quieter and it doesn't need to be as full bore and it doesn't need to be all night. It can be, but part of it for me is, yeah, I get some of that from writing and I get some of that from surfing and I get some of that from going to Burning Man or travel. And I get a lot of it, most of it, it's the same thing we're talking about at Burning Man, drafting on a newcomer's experience. I have a kid now, and I'm like right behind her, and going like, what's she experiencing in life? What's her journey going to be in life? And like this book I dedicated to her, and the epilogue is all about her because that's what I realized at the end of the whole book, is that this book is it's a dedication to her. It's an anthropological artifact so that she sees the worlds that I walk through as she walks through her own worlds on her journey to becoming Baby Guetta. Like she can see the stops that I made along the way, and she can see where she could stop or where what she could reject, or just she could see the journey that I went through. So to me, that's where it comes from. Like that feeling of meaning, is my meaning has shifted. And I think that's okay too, because I don't think it would have been able to shift in the same way if I hadn't had all these experiences. I've never had the feeling with my kid, like, damn, I gave up my the fun years, because I had the fun years and now the fun has shifted. But I still want to rave. So if anybody's out there that wants me to DJ at their wedding in any county, really, go ahead and hit me up.
I mean, dude, it would not be hard for you to get some kind of agent to get some like little celebrity DJ gigs. You know what I mean? I feel like you could definitely do that.
Now we're talking.
I think
all right, I'll work on it. I was so fucking nervous at that wedding, dude. It was funny to be a performer. I'm a performer, and I have the opposite of stage fright. You know, when I go out on stage in front of a crowd, like I mean, it's 20 years in, I'm comfortable. My hands were shaking at Mendocino wedding in front of like 80 of my brother's friends and family.
I love that, though. That's
like
the best. That's the best, that you can still find something that makes you feel like that. And it's also a really good illustration, I think, for all creative forms. Like I have this thing where I think DJs would like to be comedians, and I think like rappers would like to be rock stars, and rock stars would like to be DJs. Like everybody has that for something. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well, that's the thing that happens, is that you get into a thing and then you're 20 years into the thing, and like it's like love. Really? Okay, here we go. Now I think I've got the metaphor.
Let's go.
These worlds are a lot like a love relationship. You know, when you're in a love relationship, the beginning feels like drugs. It feels like magic every single second. And if that's all you want, if that's what you're chasing, you will inevitably be disappointed in what real love is, because real love isn't butterflies in your stomach 24 hours a day, like gazing at your person and going like, oh, what you say is magical, because that's infatuation. And infatuation burns away. It comes back. I mean, it ebbs and flows, but infatuation burns away. And what's left after the infatuation burns away is or is not love. Like with my wife, I've been with my wife for, 13 years or something. Like every day is not us gazing at each other and going like, holding hands, and I mean, it's like there's work to be done, but what is left is this like foundational, healthy, like beauty kind of love, and the infatuation comes and goes depending on the day.
Right.
I think that's true for the work that we do too. With DJing, with comedy, is like I'm not feeling high when I get off stage after a great show. I mean, I'm feeling a little high, but I'm not feeling euphoria. And I'm sure you don't feel that same rave euphoria that you felt 20 years ago or 30 years ago. But underneath it is this much deeper experience of like time served and skin in the game, and like that's what real love is to me, and that is inevitable if you stick around long enough for the magic to kind of not wear off, but to dissipate itself into the entire experience. It becomes a much more mature experience, but a much more meaningful one.
And yeah, you couldn't, that is the perfect point. And what you said about your daughter too, and like seeing the cycles you went through, that she's going to have her own cycles. That's the real thing at the end of the day, right? Is like, it's not actually about the achievement that you make in whatever thing you're doing, but it's about being a part of that cycle, of that whole thing. And then just you're part of it. Other people come in, they come out, but it's, you've been a part of it. You've participated in this thing that's so much bigger than us, you know?
Completely. I mean, to me, achievement is a myth. You know, I mean, it's real, but it's like, who's going to remember David Guetta in 4 generations?
Oh, yeah.
Is anybody going to remember anybody? I mean, we remember like Jesus and Gandhi and like Attila the Hun. Like nobody's getting remembered. The biggest of us all are not going to be remembered. As, you know, I don't have any illusions that 2 generations after I'm gone, people will be talking about the comedy stylings of Moshe Kasher. What I am aware of is, from working hard and doing what I loved, I've made the time that I'm here really exciting and really meaningful, and I'm able to do what I love and pay the bills doing it and raise a family doing it, and that to me is the mark of a life well served. And that's not to say like be a comedian, be an artist, because there's people out there that are doing that with or without financial gain. You know, Joseph Campbell says like follow your bliss. Like my bliss led me into crazy different corners of the universe, but the point of it was to like keep following it.
I think we should stop there because that's such a nice way to wrap all of this up. But man, I could talk to you for hours, man. This has been a real treat. I really appreciate your time.
Here. My treat. Will you send me some mixes of yours?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I was going to say too, if you know plenty of people and probably don't need this, but if there's anyone I can connect you with, DJ wise, music wise, at any point, always happy to do that.
Oh, cool. Oh, actually, let me say this too. Maybe you can put it into the podcast. Here's a tidbit. I just finished the hardest mix I have ever done. This was so difficult because I had this idea after writing this chapter. I should do a mixtape of every artist that I reference in the book, which, had I known while I was writing it, I would have written it in a more easily mixable format.
Yeah.
So, you know, Joe Smooth and Sven Voth don't go together naturally, but I just finished it. And I don't know if it's the greatest technical mix of all time, but definitely it's the most specific mix of all time. I don't believe that's ever been done before. Ooh. A mixtape that is specifically dedicated to the artist referenced in one specific chapter in a book. So I'll send it to you.
Please.
I'll send it to you and you can send it. You can drop it along with the episode, or I don't know what you'll do with it. But anyway,
I would love to hear it.
Yeah.
And I'll send you some stuff too, man. That'd be super fun. But yeah, thanks again, man. I don't want to take up any more of your time, but this was really great.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
I hope I see you on a dance floor somewhere someday.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm out in DC, man. So if you're ever out this way, hit me up. We'll go out. We'll do something.
Oh, awesome. I love it.
All
cool.
Right,
nice talking to you too.
Yeah. Peace out, dude. Thank you.
Later.
Bye.
Bye.